and thank you for coming by to watch my episode today on how to succeed at taking the GAMSAT, which is the medical admissions test in Australia. So just a bit of background if you haven't been here before. My name is Tess and I am about to commence my journey changing careers from physiotherapist to a doctor, and I'll be heading to medical school at the start of January 2019. So the GAMSAT, the dreaded GAMSAT. Oh man, we've had some times, we've had some good times and some bad times. And I guess, there are so many things that I could talk about the GAMSAT, but I wanted to kind of focus on today what I did to prepare for it, and what I think my tips were for success, so that hopefully if you're thinking about sitting the GAMSAT for the first time, or you've sat it before and you're wanting to improve on your score for next time, then hopefully some of these tips will help you out, and so that you can succeed in whatever your dream career is and holds. Just to give you a bit of an idea of where I'm coming from with this, so I've sat the GAMSAT 3 times in total. The first time I sat it, I was very underprepared. I had no real idea or kind of, I just didn't really understand what the test really entailed and what it was going to be like to sit it on the day. And I think that it was almost like my practice run the first year round. It gave me so much knowledge of just about like how to actually sit the test. It's like an art form. It's like running a marathon, the GAMSAT. And I think that I needed that first time. It was almost like to see how it went and to practice for the next time. But that wasn't how I, perceived it at the start. So I went in there trying my best. So the first time I sat the GAMSAT, I had been thinking about medicine for a very long time, but if you've read any of my other blogs, you'll know that I didn't have a lot of confidence in myself, and I didn't really believe that I had what it took to get into med school. So I really left studying to the last minute. I left signing up until the absolute last minute and paying, and then I left studying to the absolute last minute as well. And I think probably a lot of that came from self-doubt. So I guess tip number 1 would be if you're choosing to do the GAMSAT, just commit to it. Go hard. Do not doubt yourself, because honestly, doubt is something that will just like creep into your brain. And that's my number 1 tip, is believe in yourself. So the first time I sat the GAMSAT, I only studied for about I would say 6 weeks. It was probably, my intention was to study for longer, but it was so patchy and I didn't really know what resources I needed. I kind of didn't have a steady approach. I really just kind of spent most of my time on the science portion of the GAMSAT, and I didn't really focus on the other sections, and I only did kind of theory related studying. I didn't actually do any practice questions or anything like that. So it was a pretty poor preparation period, and on the day I had a pretty horrific experience, just in terms of like nothing went wrong, but just in terms of just the pure mental endurance that you need to sit through a 5.5-hour exam in a test center for about 8 or 9 hours all up by the time you kind of get in there and they do the ID checks and you kind of have lunch and do all of that stuff. So it is such an epic marathon of a day, and I felt very overwhelmed. I was sitting in a sea of thousands of people, questioning myself the whole time and being like, oh gosh, do I really want to do this, pursue this career in medicine? And I don't really believe that I should be here. And so I guess at the end of that day, I walked out just feeling just so mentally and emotionally exhausted. But as soon as I walked, and I tried my absolute best, of course, on the day, but there were lots of things that I didn't know. And I think like sitting that first GAMSAT was such a good experience, because I realized as I walked out of there that actually this was something that I really wanted. And my score that I got back was, I passed every section, if that's what that's a reasonable reflection, I guess, on the sort of baseline knowledge that I had, was that I was able to pass everything, but it wasn't really a score that was going to be competitive. And so whilst I could apply, and I did apply to med school, it didn't gain me any interviews. So what that kind of experience showed me was that I needed to be more planned and more strategic with the way that I tackled the GAMSAT the second time around. So I sat the GAMSAT 3 times, but the second time was actually the one that got me the score that I needed to get into med school. So I'll talk a bit more about how I actually studied for the second GAMSAT that I did, and how I think that is a really good recipe for success. So the second time that I sat the GAMSAT, the very first thing that I did was that I kind of sat down with my score from the year before, and I looked at each section and I worked out where my weaknesses were. So if you don't know anything about the GAMSAT, it's split into 3 sections. So section number 1 is more of a, I guess, kind of logic and your verbal communication section. So that's where you have passages of writing. So it might be, from newspapers or from poetry or prose, or it might be kind of old English. There are sections with cartoons in it sometimes, depending on the year. So basically it's about your ability to, read something for the first time and interpret it and to get the meaning from it. So it's multiple choice. And then the second part is the written communication. So that is an hour, and in 1 hour you write 2 different essays. One of them is more of a reflective and emotive piece, and the other one is more of a kind of argumentative current affairs sort of piece. And then the last section is the longest section, and for me the hardest section, which is the science section. So that's in the afternoon. It's 3 hours long, and you have I think it is high school level or year 12 level physics, and then first year of university level biology and chemistry, and then biochem in there as well. So that is quite a big section, and that's in the afternoon. So what I did was I sat down and I worked out where my weaknesses were, which were very clearly the science section. It wasn't a surprise to me. And so I felt like I could brush up the other 2 sections reasonably easily, that they were things, writing and interpreting information were things that came reasonably naturally for me. And so if I just put a little bit of time aside to actually practice the writing and practice and become more widely read, then I would be able to manage those sections fine. But the science section for me was very difficult, and I think that comes from being so long out of school and university. So I graduated from high school in 2006. I took a year off, and then I graduated from university in 2011. And when I first started sitting the GAMSAT, I believe it was 2016. So it's quite a long time from when I'd actually done some of these topics at uni, and I'd never done physics ever before. So there was quite a lot of new information that I had to gain. And so I think based on how I learn, I am much better with people telling me information. I need a teacher. I'm more of a rote learner. The problem solving and the interpret and kind of working things out in a science capacity is something that I have to work harder on. And so I felt that it was worth the investment to go in to get some extra help. So the first thing I did was I signed up for a course, and the course, I can't remember the name of it now, but what it was 2 parts, and one of the parts was a full weekend completely going over all of the science content. And then the second, and that was like quite early in the year, I think that was at the beginning of January, and the GAMSAT's in March. And then I went to a second weekend later on, which was a full practice test on one of the days. And then on the other day, it was kind of going over that and just an opportunity to ask questions and things like that. So it was quite an expensive course. I think I paid around like 2,000 Australian dollars or something like that, maybe even a little bit more. So I can talk about whether or not I think that's useful a bit later to do that. And the other investment that I made was getting a personal tutor. So I got onto Gumtree, which is kind of like, I guess, Craigslist if you're in America. I found my tutor there, and I rang him, and straight away he was just like such a hard ass. He was like, I have all these expectations for my students. I need you to come for a one-on-one session once a week. You need to come Saturday and Sunday for 3 hours for a group session. Like, this is how much it costs. I'm going to, if I don't think that you're going to get a good score, then I'll let you know, and I don't, we might not be able to continue. So it was really good, actually. I think a lot of people might have been scared away by that, but for me, I needed that sort of push to actually kind of keep me motivated. It was almost like someone kept me accountable for studying. So I got so I got onto him and he was really great. So straight away I was having a 3-hour one-on-one session going over my week kind of science section with him. And then on the weekend I would go and we would do a group session with lots of other people, and we would do 3 hours. So 3 hours Saturday morning, 3 hours Sunday morning, and he would set me homework to do kind of for the next thing. So if you learn in that way where you need somebody to help to facilitate your learning, and you I guess need that something to keep you accountable, then I would definitely recommend that. In terms of the courses, I felt like because I had the tutor, the course was not, I probably could have better allocated my money in a different way. So for me, I found that the course was like okay, and I definitely valued having a proper formal practice test where I was in a room and I couldn't get up and leave. That was certainly valuable, but in terms of value for money, I'm not really sure. But it's horses for courses, and I think you just have to play to your strengths in terms of how you learn and what you find most beneficial, and of course what resources you have. So the second thing that I'll talk about is time management. So the GAMSAT is halfway through March traditionally, and I commenced study kind of at the very last bit of December, early January. So I gave myself about 3 months to study. And I was working a full-time job. So for me, time management was so crucial because, I would go to work, have to be at work at like 8 in the morning, and then I would be home by say 5:30, and I would have to try and fit in studying, cooking dinner, trying to still exercise on some nights, on other nights still, trying to catch up with my friends and my boyfriend at the time. So my family on the weekends. So I was kind of felt like I was being pulled in lots and lots of different directions. And there were certainly times where I felt really overwhelmed, and I felt like I was, shutting myself off from all of the people in my life. So time management was super important. So what I would do at the start of every week, and by no means was this perfect at all, but what I would do ideally was sit down at Sunday night and I would just draw out for the week, what I had to do. And so my aim was to study for between 2 and 3 hours every day if I could, with one night off. And then on the weekends, I would do my 3 hours with my tutor, and then I would maybe try and do another 2 hours later on in the day. So about 5 hours a day on the weekends and 2 to 3 hours a day for most nights of the week. And like I said, it wasn't perfect. There were nights where I was just so beside myself tired that it didn't happen. There were nights when I had events on. There were, times where it just didn't work. But for the majority of the time, that's kind of what I did. And the way that I would fit the 2 to 3 hours of studying after work is that I usually would actually get up early. So I would set my alarm for about 5:30 in the morning, and I would get up and do 1 hour of study before I would get ready for work for the day. And then I would come home and I'd only have 2 hours of study left to do. And the reason that I did that, I'm not a morning person at all. But I found that it was actually the only way I could fit it in, because when I would come home from work, I just didn't have the mental endurance at all to keep concentrating and to keep learning, and that was the only way I could do it. So if you're studying for the GAMSAT and you're working full time like I would certainly recommend writing out your schedule for the week and trying as best you can to stick to it. Do whatever it takes to keep you accountable. I had my tutor that kept me accountable. I also had, my partner and friends in my life at the time who knew that I was studying, and so they would keep me accountable. My family as well. And so I think that's important if you struggle with keeping to a schedule. The next thing is about kind of focusing on your weak areas and doing practice questions and practice exams. So again, like the first time that I sat the GAMSAT, I just did way too much theory and I didn't do any practice questions. And I actually think, again, this is very personal, but for me, the practice questions are the way that I learned the most, because it's one thing to understand the concept and understand the theory, but you have to actually be able to apply that to lots and lots of different scenarios and lots of different questions so that you're going to be ready to tackle whatever questions they throw at you on the day. And so I would study, a particular topic, and then I would go and do questions related to that topic, and then I would kind of correct them, and then I would work out where I went wrong, and then try them again. So, and that would happen like over a period of time. So I would just keep going back to my weak areas and keep doing practice questions in my weak areas and then going back over them. And sometimes that was like really like beating my kind of morale with a baseball bat sort of thing, because some you're never going to know everything. And there were some areas that I just would understand the concept and then just never get the question right. And so every time I would do the questions, it was honestly just like, why am I doing this? Like, I'm never going to get these right. And so if you're feeling frustrated while you're studying, I'm totally with you. I totally understand. It's really difficult, but you've just got to keep going, because it's a really big test and you never know what they're going to throw at you on the day. And it might be all on that really difficult topic, or they may not bring the difficult topic up at all. So you've just got to cover every area and do those practice tests. The other thing is that it is a marathon. It is a mental marathon. And so, you're in there for 5.5 hours of actual exam time, but it's an 8 to 9 hour day. So you've got to be ready for that. It's like if you were going out to run a marathon, you wouldn't not train and just get out there and think you could run the whole 42 kilometers. It doesn't work like that, and neither does the GAMSAT. And so if you're only doing, studying for an hour at a time, and your concentration span or mental endurance isn't longer than that, then even if you know the stuff, and even if you're, super clever, if you're really tired, you're going to make mistakes. And so the best thing is to actually train like you're training for a race. So sometimes I would dedicate a full Saturday to studying for 5.5 hours total, with just 1 hour break in the middle, like the full day exam. Don't use a calculator, because you don't have a calculator in the exam, so there's no point cheating while you're studying. So for as much as you can, set your study up like it's the actual exam day, so that you're not going to be surprised on the day when things are really hard. The other thing is to make your studying as fun as you possibly can. So I'm not one of those people that, really relishes chemistry and physics. I love kind of biology and biochem. That's comes really naturally to me, and I love that stuff. But the chemistry and physics really pushed me, and I found it really dry content and really hard to stay concentrated on. So I had to make it fun for myself. So kind of getting on the internet and using like YouTube videos, or the Khan Academy is another great resource, and just all those sorts of video kind of content. If that's good for you, make it fun that way. Find topics that you think are interesting. I would bribe myself and say do a little bit of biology first, and then get to like the physics that I didn't enjoy. And then for obviously the sections 1 and 2, you've got to stay really widely read and really understand lots of different topics. So do that in a way that's fun for you. So I really liked, again, YouTube. So for the School of Life was one of the channels that I really liked and enjoyed. I would listen to podcasts. So The Guardian Long Reads is a really good podcast that I personally enjoyed. So finding audiobooks, podcasts, YouTube, online videos, learn in any sort of way that you can. Any sort of passive learning is good. So I used to go out for a run, and then I would have an audiobook in my ear or a podcast in my ear, so that I was kind of learning all of the time. So because you never know what they're going to ask you. They could ask you any minuscule thing, or, you might be sitting there and you just think of that one little like interesting fact that you heard on a podcast while you were out running or at the gym, and that could be like the crux of your essay. So you just never know. Any sort of information you can get in any sort of way, do it. Read the newspaper, watch the news, just be like a vessel for knowledge. Just for those 3 or 4 months that you're studying, just be open to taking on board everything that you can. Studying for the GAMSAT is really hard. It's arduous. It can be boring. You're sitting there and you're studying, and all your family and friends and everyone else are out living their lives. And it's really normal, I think, to question yourself and question why you're doing this. And so for me, reminding myself of my goal was really important. And just whenever I was having a tough time, which to be honest with you was like most days, like I would have just these moments of doubt where I would just find myself kind of sitting and staring off into the universe, being like, is this really worth it? And so on those days, I would just remind myself of my goal. I would like write my goal like up on my wall behind my desk, like on a piece of paper, and stick it there. Just remind myself that I want to be a doctor. I'm doing this for a reason. It is okay. It's just a short period of time in your life where you're going to have to sacrifice things, and you're going to finish the GAMSAT and it's going to be great. So reminding myself of the end point was really, really important for me. And the other thing was talking about it. So as with everything in life, balance is so, so important. And I think that talking to your family and your friends and your partners about how you're feeling is really integral to success. You can't bottle everything up and feel really stressed or feel really overwhelmed and do well, I don't think. So, speak to people and talk to them about how you're going. And if you're already at university doing an undergraduate degree and you're surrounded by a lot of people that are already doing the GAMSAT, you're in the best position because you can really talk to others about how they're going with their study. You can maybe study together. I wasn't that fortunate because I was doing this as a, someone who had been out of uni for like 7 years. I was not near people who were also studying for the GAMSAT, and I didn't really think I could speak to any of my colleagues about it because I didn't want them to kind of I just didn't want them to think that I was running away from the career that that they loved and that I loved too. So I talked to my friends outside of work about it, and I talked to my family about it, and that just helped to keep, I guess, my mental health really good, because it's one of those times as well that it is normal, I think, to have low mood at times. And so it's really important to manage that by talking to people, by making sure you keep an active lifestyle, by eating well, and all of those sorts of things. So, I mean, it's all about the balance. And really, if you think about it, a career in medicine is challenging in terms of time management and balance as well. So just think about this as like a practice time, because when you become a doctor in the future, you're going to be experiencing this same sort of pushing and pulling for like different aspects of your life. And so that's, I guess, my kind of tips for studying for the actual GAMSAT. In terms of tips for on the day, what I would recommend is stop studying the day before at like 5 p.m. I would always take the Friday off. It's on a Saturday, so I would take the Friday off work, and I would use that day just to kind of lightly review as much as I could. And then when it would get to 5 p.m, I would stop studying and just give myself a rest, exercise, eat a healthy dinner, and then I would prep my meal for the next day. And so some people, I think, buy their meals. That's totally fine, like on the Saturday, buy your lunch. But I was always happier to kind of take a packed lunch, because you never know whether there's going to be somewhere to buy your lunch on the day. Have a good morning routine. If you need a coffee, have a coffee. Don't kind of get up late and rush there, because it's only going to put you in a frazzled headspace. So give yourself enough time in the morning to get ready and to get there on time. Know where you're going to park your car if you're going that way, or know what public transport that you're taking the day before, so that there is like no questions on the day about like how you're going to get there and if you're going to be there on time. Then when you get there, eat at the very last minute again before you go into the exam room. So for me, I would have had like a breakfast, and then by the time I would get to the exam center, I would make sure that I went to the toilet, and then I would eat a banana at the very last minute before I went in. And the reason I would do that is because you're in this test center for a very long time, and I don't know about you, but I cannot think if I'm hungry. So I wanted to give my body enough fuel to be able to get through the first part of the test and to not have to worry about being hungry or not having to worry about brain fade or anything like that. When it comes to lunchtime, if you're with a group of friends, that's great, but do whatever you need to do. So if you're the type of person that thrives off like social, interaction to clear your head and to make yourself feel better, do that. If you're the type of person that needs to like pull yourself away, go for a walk, have a stretch, reflect on the first part of the exam, do that. So do whatever it is that you need to do to like recover and get ready for the afternoon section. So for me, I personally like to go by myself, go for a big walk, go to the toilet, have my lunch, sit, I'd normally stretch, and then just kind of try to clear my head. I would listen to music and just try and relax for the afternoon session. I guess kind of using my brain as like the smallest amount possible. So I would do that. And then when you're going back in, again, I would make sure I would eat just before I went into there. And in the afternoon session, that's probably where I made sure that I drank a lot, because you're starting to get really tired by that point. It's really hard to stay focused. And so kind of giving myself kind of sips of water and Gatorade would keep me kind of active and kind of give me a little reset button so that I could keep concentrating on my exam. And then at the end, you're gonna feel exhausted, and it's going to feel very strange. And then you're gonna have to sit in a line of cars. I mean, depending on the test center, but I set all of mine in Melbourne. And whenever you leave, it's like this, thousands of people running out the doors to get to their cars. And then you get in your car, and then you've got to sit in there, like sometimes for like an hour to even get out the gate, because it's like so many people trying to exit, and you're so tired and exhausted. So again, I'm talking so much about food right now, but I would normally have like a treat that I'd left in the car. So that's my tips for success on the actual day, which kind of like focus mainly around like food and toileting yourself, like basic human needs. But it sounds silly, but these are things that I didn't know the first time. So there you go. I hope that this kind of video has helped anybody out there who hasn't sat the GAMSAT before or has sat it and is looking for tips for the next time. I am no expert, and the score that I got the second time round, it was enough to get me in, and I was really, really proud of it. But it wasn't, a perfect score. So I think that my other advice would be to take advice from a lot of people and then pick what is right for you. Only you know how you learn and how you best study. And so, just be yourself and believe in yourself. Keep your end goal in mind, because at the end of the day, the person that's sitting the exam is you. The person who's going to go off and go to med school is you. And so you have to believe that this is the right path for you to be on, for you to succeed. I hope that helps. Let me know in the comments below if you kind of have any other tips maybe that people could use, or if you found these tips helpful. And as usual, if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel or to my blog. I would really appreciate it. I also appreciate all feedback, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. All right, and I will see you next time. See ya.